Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4 p.m. ET on Tuesday, and I am Hank Phillippi Ryan. This is Mighty Mysteries on a Mighty Blaze, and I am so pleased for you to be joining us today. We are so honored to have today Susanna Kearsley, whose book, The Vanished Days, is just out. I cannot wait to talk to you about this book. Let me tell you, listeners, I love this book. I will admit to you, just because it's just us, that this is not the kind of book I generally read, historicals. And I just fell in love. I was immersed. I was transported. I was carried away. Susanna Kearsley is my new favorite. I keep saying this is total immersion reading. It is just out on October 5th, brand new. You will love it. Look at that cover. It is beautifully, transportingly, gorgeously, artistically wonderful. And I cannot wait to talk with you about it. So, welcome to A Mighty Mystery, Susanna. And here is Carla saying hello. Welcome to A Mighty Mystery. Congratulations on a wonderful book. I'm here in
Thanks so
Boston,
much.
Massachusetts on a gorgeous fall day. And where are you and how's the launch going?
I am just to the east of Toronto in Canada on the shore of Lake Ontario, and the launch is going really well. It's been fast, it's been kind of a whirlwind, and it's so nice to be able to share the book with readers finally after spending so long writing it. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Did this take longer than usual to write?
No, my books sort of they take different times to write. This one was, kind of in the middle. It took about I would say probably about 2.5, 3 years
Oh,
from the time I set pen to paper to the time I finished it. But they take anywhere from a year to 3 or 4. It just depends on the book because I don't plot. I'm a pantser,
yeah, I
which
mean,
is
I am too. I am too.
yeah,
No idea
yeah,
what's going to happen, and I
yeah.
absolutely embrace that. Except in the middle, when I think, whose idea was this? Oh dear, it
I
was
should throw it
mine.
out. Yep, yep. I know.
Terrible, terrible, terrible. So let me quickly tell you all, if you are new to A Mighty Blaze and A Mighty Mystery, Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic, which was who knows how long ago now, since all the days are sadly running together, by the fabulous Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt as a way for us all to sort of stay together in book world and writing world, to discover new authors and to discover new books and bring us together. And this is the place for mysteries every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Now, but with Susanna, it's interesting because mystery, sure, romance, sure, historical, sure, epic love story with many twists and turns and surprises and history. How do they know where to put your book? It's all of those things.
Well, they kind of never do, and it's funny because you and I are both members of Thriller Writers. And were you in the room at that BoschCon in Toronto when they formed Thriller Writers, when we had that meeting to form Thriller Writers?
No, no,
Okay,
that was
so
before my time.
so that was I was, and
Wow.
it was quite an event. One of my sore points is I never made it onto the founders list because I didn't get my paperwork back in time. I was a new mother and I didn't have my paperwork back in time. So although I am a founding member of Thriller Writers, I'm not on the website as being a founding member.
Do you think we could
But
have some sort of a, do you think we should have some sort of a campaign to
yeah, no,
to
it's not
return
important.
Susanna Kearsley
I
to the
know that's
founders?
okay. That's okay. It's enough to be part of the organization, and
Okay.
I know where I was. I remember being in the room. I was sitting right beside Lee Child. So it was fun.
Okay.
But the reason we all got together in that room was because our stories didn't fit neatly into the mystery genre all the time. We were, thrillers and mysteries share a lot of the same DNA, but they don't always share the same objective. Like the thriller has that sort of ticking clock aspect to it. That mysteries don't always have, and they're driven by different purposes, and they have different elements. And there was really a need to kind of form our own little group within the the larger world of mystery writing that was just ours, that served the needs of our members. And I think the thing of what I write is it fits sort of more neatly into thriller that way, because you can fit a bunch of different stuff into it. But thriller in an old-fashioned sense, thriller in sort of the Mary Stuart sense, the Evelyn Anthony sense, the Helen McInnes sense, where you've got a bunch of other things going on, and you've got history, mystery, romance, and my husband always says that they're like old Hitchcock movies. There's a bit of everything. There's a bit of the paranormal sometimes, that you don't quite understand what something's going, why something's happening. Kind of like with the birds, you never understand why the birds are doing what they're doing. They're just doing what they're doing, but there's a romantic thread. It's not always the main thread, but it's there. There's a mystery, but it's not always a body in the library mystery. There's, there are all these different threads tangled up together. And it's just the way the story shapes itself for me. And I just kind of go with it. I never really stop and worry about where the book is going to fit on the shelf. I just kind of leave that to the poor marketing department that I'm sure drinks really, really heavily at every publisher that has ever published me. And maybe that's why. I mean, I've been published since 1994 was my first publication. And that's probably why I can still walk into a room at most cocktail parties and people are like, should I have heard of you? Do I know you? Because, it's very difficult to categorize where my books go. I don't fit neatly anywhere.
Well, I think the Vanished Days, and I want to introduce you formally in a minute, but this is so interesting because I think the Vanished Days is like life, though large and historic. It comes out of love, and it comes out of a desire to find your place in the world and clearly, as you put so beautifully in the flatfish metaphor, and I want you to talk about that, to find your other half.
Right.
And that's just so primal. It's such a primal need, no matter if you live in 1707 or if you live now, it's the same thing.
I think the writers always are asking themselves the same question over and over again. And I'm forgetting right now the name of the actor that put that so eloquently, Australian actor, and it'll come to me like at 2:00 in the morning and I'll sit bolt upright. But he said that the thing about Joel Edgerton was, because he also writes, he's a screenwriter as well. And he was saying that the thing about writers is they're always asking themselves the same question over and over again and trying to work out the same thing. And I think for me, the theme that I keep returning to again and again in my stories is probably belonging. Where do you belong? Where do I belong? And writers are always working out their own stuff to a certain degree. And I was raised, my father was an engineer, so we were always moving around. When I was little, we had lived, I don't know how many places by the time I was in my early 20s, something like 13 or 14 places by the time I was in my early 20s. So that whole concept, not that I had I loved my life. I loved that sort of peripatetic type of life, but the idea of where do I belong? Where is actually home? And is it the place or the people around you, and what does create a home and what creates family? And these are questions that I'm always looking at and bringing into my work. And so I think that in different ways in every book, I'm kind of coming at the same question in a different way. And I never really looked at it that way until I heard Joel Edgerton say that in an interview.
And it does sort of form this whole beautiful, gorgeous, epic love story, historical, searching story that has, right. It is a mystery and it is a thriller, and there is drama and certainly suspense and terror and fear throughout, and also mystery throughout. Let me quickly, before I completely forget, in case someone is new to you, let me tell people quickly your formal, quick bio. Susanna Kearsley is the New York Times, USA Today, and Globe and Mail best-selling author. She's a former museum curator who says she loves restoring the lost voices of real people to the page. And we'll talk about that definitely. Often in twin-stranded stories that interweave present and past. Her award-winning novels are published in translation in more than 25 countries. And as she said, she lives near Toronto. So this is, I have read, it's book 3 in the Scottish series, but can I just say, I think this is a standalone, clearly a standalone. Where did this book 3 thing come from, and why are we talking about it?
Well, let me hop a little bit, and then I'll come to the book 3. You were talking about the love aspect too, which is, as you say, it's extremely important. The romantic thread in all my stories is hugely important. The romance aspect, and the finding your other half, and the finding the thing that completes you. I think that probably if you could, the one thing that you cannot remove from any of my stories, the spine of any of my stories, that, if you take it out, the whole thing falls apart, is probably the romantic thread. It's like the little river running through them, that, if you take that out, the whole thing goes nowhere.
And also you have to leave the time, the historical setting in 1707.
It does. Yeah. It can't happen just anywhere. It has to happen in that specific place and time. But as for the series, I don't write in series. I write the story. And what happened originally was, once the book leaves you, as you know, it becomes the reader's book. And over on Goodreads, the readers had taken 2 of my books, The Winter Sea and The Firebird, and created a series out of them, because The Firebird is a sort of sequel to The Winter Sea. It continues. They're both dual time books with a modern day and a historical element interwoven. The historical story in The Firebird continues the historical story in The Winter Sea to a certain extent. It's got the same characters to a certain extent. But you can read them independently. You could read The Firebird and never read The Winter Sea, and it should stand on its own, because you can never, I've been in this business a long time, and my books have gone out of print. Publishers have dumped me. You never know if your books are still going to be on the shelf. So I try not to write in series, because you don't know if the books are still going to be available. But the readers over at Goodreads took those 2 books and created what they called the Slains series. Slains being the castle in Scotland that features in both books. So when this book was being published, my publisher decided, well, since it contains the same characters in both those books, in both The Winter Sea and The Firebird, but has action that goes back in time before that, and overlaps some of the action in The Winter Sea, we should group those together so people know that, that they belong sort of together. But the castle Slains is not in those books, so they were trying to come up with something different, so they called it the Scottish series. Well, a lot of my books take place in Scotland, so it's kind of tricky. I mean, if I don't know. It's an exterior.
It's really kind
an
of
external
lovely
thing. Yeah.
I mean, it's really kind of lovely, because the shorthand for it is, if you love this book, and you will, then you will love the other 2 books as well, and you can read them in any order. Well, maybe not in any order, but you can.
No, you can read them in any order. If you are holding The Winter Sea and The Firebird, you should probably read The Winter Sea first. But you could read them in any order you wanted to, and it wouldn't, it would be fine. Okay. My readers will tell you something completely different. My readers will take you off in a corner and say, look, no, you have to read them this order. But, they weren't written to be read that way. So,
you have to, Susanna, though, don't you kind of love that your readers are so passionate?
I totally love that.
Take a pal into a corner and say, here's how you should read this.
I love that.
Great.
Readers, actually, I have amazing readers, and my readers actually know better than I do sometimes because I have characters that just wander from one book into another book, and my readers sometimes know better than I do how those characters fit in, because my subconscious is the one doing it and making those characters wander in, and my readers will go, aha, he belongs over here, and he came from here, and he did this. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah.
I want you
Yes,
all
he
to
does.
know that if I look over here, I'm looking at the comments that
Yeah.
you all are leaving, and Sherry and Carla are here, and so many people are here. So Nancy is here today. That's wonderful. Sharon and Sherry, and a terrific amount of people. So Carla is here, and Carla is saying, I look forward to reading all three books. So
Oh, that's
Susanna,
great.
at some point when this is over, I know it's distracting, but go look at the comments so you can
I will
just sort of
do. Oh, I will do.
soak up the adulation. So let's go to specifically to the Vanished Days.
Okay.
And we were saying earlier that your books often take place in two different times, but
Yeah.
these are both historical times in 1683 and 1707 Scotland.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about why that time period and what was happening then.
Well, this is the first time I've written a dual time story that's all in the past, and that just kind of happened, and it was a little scary to take on. I try to do something with every book that scares me, and this one I did two things that scared me. I did that aspect of it, but I also did. Usually, my first person narrator is a female voice, and this one it was a male voice. So I was doing two things that just terrified me, because when you're doing a dual time story with a modern day component, you can use that modern day component to explain a lot of things for the reader. So the reader is a little better oriented for the past, and you can kind of pull in and out of the past and skip these large chunks of time and go back and forth. And I didn't have that. I didn't have that ability to do that when you're totally in the past. You have to be really careful you're not doing the as you know Bob stuff and having your characters talk about things where they both already know that, and you're like, why are we discussing something we both already know?
You did it
right?
so beautifully in this book with an older child telling a younger child, which completely makes sense. And also because you're so brilliant, because a child is telling a child, it's very easy to understand. It's a very simple and personal explanation, which really works so beautifully.
Well, thank you. Well, I try never to assume. You try never to assume two things. One, you try never to assume that your reader is coming into it with any level of understanding of, British history or, what a Jacobite is or anything. But also you're not necessarily writing for a Western reader. I think too often we assume that, the readers who are picking up our books are, white Western, North American or British readers, and they might not be. I mean, the person reading my book might be in Malaysia, or they might be in India, or they might have a completely different, historical, cultural background. They might not understand from their own history or their own culture why this is the way that this is, and it might look completely different. So, Ted Lieu has not Ted Lieu. Oh, sorry. I saw somebody do a really, really good speech on this just recently.
You're in launch brain. You know this.
I'm a launch brain, and it's just like completely going around. But somebody was talking about how you have to. He was in conversation with Karen Lord, who is a fantastic author, Caribbean author, and they were talking together about how you have to sort of decolonialize your writing and realize that the room that you're building is not necessarily the room that your reader is going to walk into. You have to do a certain amount of communicating properly with your reader.
It's interesting because now in the pandemic, this is writ large, because look at the people who are here, even listening to us today from all over the world. And that has sort of raised the consciousness of everyone, we hope, about how all-inclusive books can be. And you do it so beautifully by laying this groundwork. You really make the reader feel smart, as if you think, oh, I know this. Sure, I totally know this. When in reality, I had no idea about many of the historic things that took place in this novel. Let's talk a little bit briefly about, let's talk about the plot for a second, just for a second. about the plot of The Vanished Days because it does take place in 1683 and in 1707. And I love you set up the structure so beautifully with the beginning line of how this is going to be. I was a younger man when I first met her. And there's so much in that. So tell a little bit about, did that first line come first? And that sets up the dual timeline, and tell us what the story is a little bit.
The first line always comes to me first. I don't know where it comes from. It just comes from the ether of my subconscious. And that's when I know I have a story, because I will have been doing all the research beforehand, and then before I know it, it just starts swirling and creating and shaping a story. And then I get a first line, and I will get it sort of anywhere, like while I'm driving or while I'm doing the dishes or walking the dog or something. Then it usually just sort of comes fully formed. And that was the first line I got. And I thought, that can't be the first line because that's a guy. And I don't write first person men. And that's wrong. So I just kind of put it to the side and waited for another first line. But when it stuck, and when I realized that obviously is the first line for this book, it told me a number of things. It told me that not only did I have to deal with the first person narrator, but he was looking back over a number of years at what had happened as well. So it's almost like a triple time. You're dealing with an older narrator, almost like the old H.G. Wells stories, or the old
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Almost like Treasure Island. Yeah. Treasure Island or something like that, where which was one of my favorite books as a kid, where he's like, Squire Trelawney has told me to sit down and tell you this story, that type of thing, where you have this sense of like, okay, you sit down and I'm going to tell you this story. And
think about, and I don't mean to pick this apart, but it is so gorgeous, because when your subconscious offers you a first line, it's offering you a lot, because you have, I'm going to tell you a story, which means settle in and listen to this, that it was something that was interesting and formative and important enough to retell, and that it has to do with the woman, and that we instantly like the main character, because here is someone who was affected by someone else, and it mattered to them. And we get that all in that first line. I mean, Adam, one of the main characters, who's called Adam, is lovely. What was it? You said that you'd never written a male main character before. What was? No,
I'd written a male main character. I just never written first person.
First person
through his. I'd written third person. And I think my subconscious was kind of working me up to that, because the two previous works I'd done before that were a novella from the third person point of view of a previous character that I'd done a male. And then before that was a book called Bellwether, which was done through 3 points of view, one of which was a man. And I had told myself, well, I'm only doing his point of view because he speaks French, and that's the only way we're going to know what's going on in his head, is if I do his point of view. But I think my subconscious was kind of putting training wheels on me and saying, okay, you're going to, I've got a plan for you. We're going to do a first person guy. And, so you have to get a little bit of practice here. And because it's completely different writing as a man than it is to write as a woman. They notice different things. They speak differently. When they walk into a room, they notice different things. And to be convincing, I think, for me anyway, writing, I can't speak for all writers. For me to convince myself that my character is an actual man, like the men in my life, I had to kind of take away a lot of the other observational stuff that I would normally put in for a woman.
Sure. I mean, it's like a woman would say, oh, look, she's in a white tulle ballerina length Vera Wang strapless gown. Mm-hmm. And a man would say, oh, she's wearing a white dress. It's just maybe
he might not even notice the dress. He might just say her hair looked nice. He might, it's might not care what she's wearing.
How did you do that?
You almost write what you would have written, and then you take away. You look at it and you take away everything that he would not have noticed. And then after a while, you're in his head a little more, so you're not seeing what he wouldn't see. And then you kind of catch yourself if you don't, like if you become more aware of what he's interested in and looking at. And if you're writing sort of a mystery thing, then you're kind of, you catch his anxiety about things. So he's definitely not paying attention to what someone's really wearing when he's worried about if someone's going to stab him in the back. Right.
There is that. But you've made it doubly or triply difficult for yourself in writing The Vanished Days. And if you've just joined us, we're talking about The Vanished Days, a standalone, gorgeous historical mystery, suspense, romance by Susanna Kearsley, which is just out and which you will absolutely love. You're not only method acting a man, but you're method acting a man in 1707. With different ideas and different language and different clothes in Scotland and a different era with different pressures, which is triply difficult.
It can be. Well, the language again, you have to. I mean, if I was writing him as he would actually have been speaking, it would have been more difficult for the reader. So some of that I have to pull back on. Again, I have to, I put a little note at the end about, accuracy as a writer, because some of it, you just have to communicate as a writer as well. And some of the words that he would have been using, some of the language he would have been using, I have to make sure that my reader can understand him better than so I pull it back a little bit, and you try to go with just cadence and word choice,
exactly,
and that sort of thing.
You do that so beautifully. I mean, I think one of the things that sometimes puts people off of historical books, novels, is I'm not going to understand the language. And again, just like the history, you open the door to that with a touch of it, and as you say, the cadence and the rhythm and the sentence structure.
Right.
And every word that might not be familiar, you explain in a seamless kind of way, so that again, you make the reader feel smart and understand what's going on. Let's flip to the woman, though. One of the main characters, Lily, and the book opens as Lily is trying to claim her ex-husband's wages from an expedition. Talk a little bit about that, because that is just such a wonderful history and a wonderful character.
Oh, about Lily or about the history?
Oh, let's have everything.
Okay. Well, so Lily is a fictional character, because I do have characters that are based on real people and some that are actual real people. But Lily is actually just fictional. And there were, at the time that I'm setting that part of the story, the union between England and Scotland had just happened. And one of the things that the English government had done was to send up a whack ton of money to Edinburgh to achieve a number of things, but ostensibly it was to pay off the debts of a lot of the people who had lost money in the Darien expedition, which was Scotland's attempt to build a colony in what is now Panama.
Can I just take you off the path for 1 second?
Of course.
This Darien expedition
is
something that, is obviously a jumping off point of the book. I had never heard of that. Can you just tell us in a little capsule what that is? Then we'll go back to Lily in the time.
I'll try to capsule. It's a passion of mine, and it's what I actually thought the book was going to be about. I was actually setting out to write an almost Winds of War type book about the Darien expedition. That's what this I thought was going to be. Because I loved that whole, I'm 55. I grew up in that whole era with the big books where, something would be happening in London and something would be happening in New York. something in Jamaica and something in Darien, and I thought I can do this. I'm old enough now. I can tackle this. And that's not what the book ended up being. But the Darien expedition was an attempt by Scotland to create a colony for itself in what is now Panama. And what they were attempting to do was they had formed their own version of an East India Company, with the blessing and the charter given to them by King William, their king. And they were going to bring cargoes in by ship on the Atlantic side to this colony, to this town that they had established, and carry them overland at Little Isthmus and put them on ships on the Pacific side and, take them to where they needed to go. So by doing that, they would then undercut all the trade of the other, like the East India Company and the Dutch East India Company, that had to go down and around the capes of South America and of Africa. So it was a brilliant plan. And they had investment interest from Britain, they had investment interest from Holland, they had investment interest all over Europe. But then what happened, of course, was King William really didn't like the Scots at all. Long story, long, deep-seated story, and I don't have time to get into it here. But he just undercut them at every single level. He made it known that the English investors should not invest, so they pulled their money out. He was Dutch himself, so he scuppered all their Dutch investors as well. The Dutch investors pulled out, leaving only the Scottish investors to invest in the company. And the Scottish investors came out of the woodwork. I mean, like ordinary people put their life savings into this company. So it was a huge leap of faith by Scotland to put all their money into this company and this dream of a colony that would, be the saving. Yeah. That would give them this, this leg up. So they got their ships. They got their ships in spite of William. That's a whole nother story. And they sailed off with their people. William then sent proclamations to all the British colonies, Jamaica, New York, all the little islands along the way, not to trade with the Scots. They had packed their ships with. Now you'll read in different things that one of the things the Scots did was they took trading things that were just inappropriate to trade with natives, and that's one of the reasons they failed. They weren't meaning to trade with natives; they were meaning to trade with the colonies to get provisions for their colony. But William made it illegal for any of the British colonies to trade with or give aid to the Scots. So everywhere they put into port, they were not given assistance or aid. And they refused to believe that their king would have done that until they were actually shown the proclamations. And it's quite heartbreaking to read their reaction and, how angry and upset and betrayed they were. Anyway, they made it down to the colony, and they established their fort. There was infighting between the two factions that made up their colony group, because they had some on the Highland Jacobite side and some on the more Presbyterian side, including some people that had been involved in Glencoe. So not a good mix. When the Spanish came out against them, again, William didn't send anybody down to help them, even though he would send his fleet down to help Jamaica when the Spanish bothered Jamaica, Jamaica had only been taken from the Spanish like 40 years before.
So basically, just quickly, because I know we're running out of time, and you all look up the failed Darien.
The Darien expedition.
It's this huge betrayal, and a whole country had the rug pulled out from under it by.
And it was bankrupted. It bankrupted Scotland. A lot of people died on the expedition. And it's one of the main reasons why the Union went through, because people were bankrupted, including a lot of wealthy people who then saw the benefit in backing the Union. And the money came up from England to compensate them. Mostly the wealthy people got paid as compensation. But some of the people whose family members had lost their lives on the Darien expedition would then come forward to get the wages owed to these sailors who had died. And Lily is one of these people.
Yes, so we enter Lily.
I can't do anything like short. I'm sorry.
I know, I love it. That's why we love it. This is why this book is so fantastic, and this is why people are saying.
So she's one of those people, and the thing of the story is that the hero Adam is supposed to find out if she actually deserves it, if she's telling the truth, if she was actually this guy's wife or not.
So it's a marvelous love story. It's a marvelous war story. It's a marvelous historical story based on real life people and based on real life events. And that is another thing that makes it so I keep saying immersive, but it definitely is. Even to, and I know you were saying that there are some real life people in it. And one of the things in your really brilliant author's notes, and when you all read this, and I know you will, do read the author's notes because they are fascinating, all about Susanna's not only research, and not only her love of this history and of this time and of storytelling, but of her responsibility to the people who might be involved in the stories. For instance, she says, I'm just going to read this quickly. I have a code I keep to when I deal with real life characters. I don't want to make anyone a villain unless I can do it with a clear conscience. That person is no longer here to defend themselves, and I must be convinced from my research that I'm portraying them correctly. That is so honorable of you.
Oh,
what is it in your heart that makes you do that?
I don't know. I feel that way about the person. I always felt that way about the person, but you know what? It's been strengthened a lot recently by so many things that have been in the news lately. And you know what strengthened it the most was when Olivia de Havilland came out of her seclusion. Olivia de Havilland, the actress, who is so private, came out of her seclusion just to fight this lawsuit with, I believe it was Fox. I don't want to say, I think it was Fox, who did the TV movie about, it wasn't even about her, it just had her as a character in it, where they had her character call her sister a bitch. She called her sister, admittedly, she said she called her sister a dragon lady. She didn't get along with her sister, but she said, I would never have called her a bitch. And she thought that was important enough to come out of her seclusion to fight for that, because she said it's wrong for you to do that to real people. It's wrong for you to twist our lives like that and to put those words in our mouth. And it becomes that hit me because that becomes the story. And and whatever you do to someone, that becomes the story. And there's that that wonderful quote from Othello that I can't remember. It's there on the tip of my tongue, but the wonderful quote that Iago says in Othello about he who steals from me, he who steals my purse, steals nothing because it's just my purse. But he who steals my reputation steals, the thing that doesn't mean anything to him, but it means everything to me. I like to paraphrase. And you can't give the reputation back to somebody once you've taken it. It becomes, what everybody thinks happened. And, so you better be darn sure. And, I wasn't there. I wasn't standing beside the Duke of Hamilton. I don't know for sure, but I do know for sure what his friends thought of him. And I do know for sure what his actions were. You can only know a character by what they say, what other people, say about them, and what they do. And I have to be sure from those three things that a person is doing enough for me to be able to cast them in the role of a even slightly villainous person. Otherwise, I create someone fictional, because it's not that important to me. I can create a fictional person. I don't have to. My story is just a story weighed against a human life. right? A real person's life
Have you
is
heard from
always
any
going to be
of
worth
the
more.
relatives or ancestors of the people the real life people who are in the book?
Not the ones I made the villain of,
No, but right.
but yes, the real Murrays and Grahams descendants. I wasn't brave enough to contact them when I wrote The Winter Sea, back in 2000, 2008 when the book first came out. But in between that time, they found me, and it has been one of the most glorious things in my life. One of the things I am, that I treasure the most. They are just wonderful people. Um, they still live at Abercairny. They own Inchbrakie. The Grahams have since moved down to Devonshire in England, but they are all tremendously helpful with my research. They are such wonderful people. They are still friends, the two families, and it's one of the great joys of my life to know these people and be friends with them. I
And isn't
really,
that
really.
amazing that you have created, um, I don't know, I don't want to say memories, but a history for them that is glorious and reassuring and powerful and meaningful. And you've helped create their legacy that they embrace, just little that's
Well,
amazing.
it maybe that's what I'm here for. I mean, one of the most gratifying things that they said, that the Murray family said to me when this book came out, was thank you for giving Robin back to us. And I know I'm because they're just, the Murrays were left completely out of the pages of the history books. And these are not inconsequential people, the Murrays and the Grahams. If you had been alive at the time and you had moved in those circles and at the court of the Jacobite king, you would have known who all these people were. You would have, they would have been completely known to you, the names. Captain Thomas Gordon was not an inconsequential man. And the idea that they have been just curated out of the history books is something that makes me very indignant. So anything I can do to put them back on the page, to put them back and to put them back in their own words, because I'm able to use the words. Like Robin has a speech in that book to Adam when Adam hands him a letter that was actually handed to Robin, offering Robin Murray. Anybody that's read The Winter Sea knows John Murray. Robin is John's older brother, who was actually in prison in Edinburgh at the time. And he was given a letter offering him money in return for betraying his friends. And Robin makes a speech in return. Well, that speech is taken from his actual words. And to be able to put those words back on the page and give him that little corner of history that he rightfully deserves is just worth the whole shebang. It's worth anything.
Well, thank you for. I mean, there's a phrase, a sentence that's sort of woven throughout your book, that where someone tells someone, and I won't say anything about that. You can just tell by what someone does. You can if they're good. And it has been a joy to talk with you and meet you and learn about you. Thank you, Susanna, for letting us live in this time and for introducing us to these marvelous, unforgettable now characters. Do you have 2 more minutes to stay with us and answer a couple of questions?
Oh, of course I do. Of course I do. And it was Ted Lieu, by the way. I looked it up. It was Ted Lieu who said that thing about decolonizing. I had to look it up.
How did you possibly?
I had to give him credit for it because it was such a great. It was Ted Lieu and Karen Lord. If you look it up on YouTube, there's a really, really good interview with both of them.
I bet the fabulous Margaret was finding that right now, and we'll put up the link in our chat. She is the best. So let's ask, do you have, Mighty Blaze is asking, can you tell us a bit how you approach the editing process as a fellow pantser? I'd love to hear about this.
But how do you do it? Because it's.
I can't wait to get to the editing process. I can't wait. If I could just put my new book, as I will show quickly, Her Perfect Life, which just went into a second printing with stars.
Beautiful cover.
And Publishers Weekly. But all I want to do is get the story out, and then I can go back, and after I find out what happens, then I go back and make it be the story that it's meant to be. So I love
Right.
that part. But how
Because
do
I
you?
think you and I are both similar in that, as you're getting towards the middle, like it's kind of like you start with this beautiful, beautiful idea, and the idea is always so perfect. And then as you're writing into the middle, it looks more and more like a monster, and you're like, oh no, what is happening to my beautiful idea? It looks nothing like what I thought it was going to look like, and it looks so different from where I thought it was going to go.
Yeah.
And I've learned to just push right through that and get to the end, because it's not till I get to the end and somebody says something, usually in dialogue, and I think, aha, so that's the theme.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. In this case, it was Captain Gordon was sitting chatting with Adam, and he said something, and I went, that's it. That's what the book's all about. And then you're just sort of racing to get to the end, because then you can go back and pull that thread all the way through, and you can look exactly as Hank says. You can look and see, okay, well, where can I enhance this? Where can I fix this? And how can I how can I make this better? And how can I
And often it's already there. When you
yeah.
go back and look for the thread, your subconscious has put it there. You just didn't know what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's some books, when I get there, they don't really need as much editing as I think they're going to need, because a lot of the time it's my subconscious has been doing it all the way along, and they just need a little bit of light pulling, and sometimes they need the whole middle scooped out and done differently.
Please don't say that. That's where I am in my new book. So it always works. You're supposed to say to me now, it always works.
It always works. But it is surprising. It's surprising how it can be very much like piecing a puzzle, where like you're feeling for the edges most of the time, and then you're trying to fill in this big hole where all the pieces look like they're the same shape and you don't know where they go. And then when you get towards the end, everything starts falling in a lot faster, because there's only one place that piece can go. It can only go here,
and the options start narrowing.
Yeah, it goes a lot faster, and then you see the whole picture, and it's really cool. That moment when you see the whole picture and you know what's going on, it's a really cool moment.
That's what we're working for, isn't it? That's what you're working for, is for that moment of clarity, and the sort of when the fear goes away, but by your own perseverance, and your own belief that the universe will provide your brain with this idea when the time comes.
But I guess in the editing, like for editing, like with anything, you take out what clutters, right? So as Hank was saying, like, when you're like, I had sections where I have to discuss history, because people don't know the history, but there might be things that I find fascinating that clutter. Right? So it doesn't need to be there. Does it need to be 6 pages of people looking at these paintings? No, it needs to be 3. So what do I take out? How do I refine it? What do you actually need to know? Do you need to know 6 kings? No, you need to know 3. Do you need to know their names? No, you need to know, so what doesn't need to be there? And you just, what is the thing, like, to sometimes add, but often take away? Editing is a mostly taking away. Very often adding.
Everything that isn't the book.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question. I'm looking at what kind of books do you read, Susanna?
I read a lot of fantasy. I love fantasy. Yeah, it's my jam. I'm a big Mel Jean Brooke fan. I love Mel Jean Brooke's steampunk books. In fact, my gift to myself for finishing this book was to read The Kraken King by Mel Jean Brooke, which I had sitting on my shelf for like about 2 years. And I bought it.
Wonderful prize for yourself.
Bought it.
Speaking of favorite authors, though, I can't let this go. When I started reading about your book, I thought, ooh, I wonder what Diana Gabaldon thinks about this. And then I read the blurb on the cover where the amazing angel Diana Gabaldon says, "Fascinating and immersive. I love a novel that deals with the many ways in which people keep their secrets." What a marvelous gift, talking about gifts.
She is just a gift. That's a good way to describe her. She and I both present at the Surrey International Writers Conference. I don't know if you've ever presented there, but for about the past, I think this will be our 12th year presenting together this year. Not presenting together all the time, but I think the first year I met her there, I ran over her foot with my suitcase. That was how I met her. And she is just the kindest, nicest, warmest person. And has, she's extremely wonderful with the unpublished writers. Surrey is a conference for all kinds of writers. So, published, unpublished, in all genres. And, but she has always been just tremendous with me, and has just, there are no words. I'll just get all, verklempt, because there are no words for just how
you are cut from the same
and nice
cloth.
she has been. Yeah, she's just a wonderful person.
And well deserved. You two are cut from the same cloth. Congratulations on the Vanished Days. I know all of you are running out to get this right now, in about 2 seconds. As we close, we have gone on way too long today, but I could not resist talking to Susanna Kearsley about the wonderful The Vanished Days. Quickly, before we say quick goodbye, Susanna, let me just tell you all, I'm going to go over here and grab next week's book. And now for something completely different. Tamron Hall's debut thriller, As the Wicked Watch. Tamron, as you know, yes, the NBC News. Tamron Hall, yes, the television journalist, talk show host, and all-around wonderful Emmy-winning reporter. Tamron Hall's first book, As the Wicked Watch, which is it's quite terrific.
What's the first line? Let's see what it is. I love first lines. What's the first line?
And this is such a TV book. It is, Jordan, we're live in 60, said Tracy Klein, my favorite field producer, nudging me to get into place. So tick, 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 we're live in 60. And that's something.
That tick, 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 the little clock.
Yeah.
That's always it.
Susanna, brilliant question. Again, Susanna Kearsley, thank you for coming to A Mighty Mystery today. We hope you'll come back in 3 years. What's your next book? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, it's going to be called The Lesser Stars. And it's, again, Murray's and Graham's, but I'm going even further back to 1613, to the court of James the First and Sixth. And it's going to be a dual time with a modern day. And I'm doing male first person as part of it, but I'm going to do present tense. So that's going to scare the crap out of me even further. So yeah, I'll be even more scared. Lots to tell you when I come back. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so wonderful.
Our pleasure. And we will hold a spot for you for The Lesser Stars. Is that what it's called?
The Lesser Stars.
The Lesser Stars. Congratulations on that. Congratulations on The Vanished Days. And thank you so much, Susanna, for being with us today. And thank you all for joining us. And we will see you next time.